The process of creating tracks and signals is relatively straightforward. Using the Design Tools window, you are provided with multiple types of tracks, crossovers, switches, and signals. Let's start with tracks first. I'm going to zoom in here to make things easier to see. To add tracks to the designer grid, simply select a type of track and then begin clicking on open cells where you wish to place the track pieces at. We'll create a simple single track area for now. As a requirement, all tracks must have a starting and ending block piece. These type of tracks are all located on the second row of selectable track types in the Designer Tools window. So to make this section of track a complete block, we will add ending blocks to each end of the track segment. And with that, we now have our first complete track segment. Now let's go a step further and create a small control point, also known as a turnout, junction, or interlocking. A control point is an area where multiple tracks come into play and intertwine with each other in some form or fashion via the use of switches or crossovers. To do this, we'll create another track segment and add a switch to the designer grid. A good rule to keep in mind is that when designing an area where multiple tracks are involved, is to leave at least one row or column empty between tracks to place a signal where appropriate. Now we will add some signals. Signals by most conventions will line up with the start of the block in the direction that they govern movement for. I'm going to momentarily zoom in a little closer so you can see how this works. As you can see, when I place a signal here, I place it on the right-handed side of the start of the block that it will govern movement for. Therefore, if the signal were to point in a different direction, let's say west, it would go above the tracks because that is the right-handed side. Also, take note of how the bottom of the signal lines up with the start of the block. This is a key thing to remember to do without having to manually link the signal to a track. More on that will be talked about in a later video. With that, we have completed a basic control point. In the next video, we will talk about creating stations for control points and how they will eventually map to each of the components in a track diagram.